He's the senator from Virginia. He was Reagan's Secretary of the Navy, and he's now emerged as our champion on Capitol Hill. And why are you doing it when you're from Virginia? Because it's a matter of principle. I've begun to get to know this guy, and it is a matter of principle. And when I say to him where we're coming from, he goes, I'm basically coming from the same place. Okay? Now, he needs our help. Right now, he's trying to get a bill through the Congress to set up an independent commission, and it's getting whittled away. And why is it getting blocked? Because you still have leadership in the Democratic Party, the Feinsteins of California, the Schumers of New York, and the supermajority of knuckleheads in the Republican Party who don't think that this stuff should get through. He needs our help to make this stuff get through there. We need our champions, and we can't just rely on them and push them. We have to support them as well. So Congress will move. Look at the stuff that's happening now. You know, on the needle exchange thing, some of you know this issue, the 1,000-foot stupid-ass ban they put on trying to legalize needle exchange at the federal level, but I think that thing's going to get through. What I hear is that the right people are trying to do the right thing. And on reforming the mandatory minimums, the Attorney General has made this a personal commitment. The Justice Department is acting in good faith. Dick Durham is introducing bills. They're trying to get Republican co-sponsors. God bless them. You know, but it is going to move. There's a commitment coming out of the White House. What Obama's Justice Department did on the Justice Department guidelines on medical marijuana just a few weeks ago, that was major. That was major. Yeah. That was major. It sends a signal to state government that it will be okay for them to get their hands dirty and begin to get involved in the business of medical marijuana. It means that to the extent that our evolution involves local government becoming involved in the regulation of this, because that's what's needed to legitimize our cause, that's what happened. That they can no longer say that the feds are against us. They can no longer say we can't do this because we don't know what the feds will do. It opens the door. Even the drugs are saying quietly so far, let the states deal with that marijuana issue. And you know, that's good enough by me. I'm not looking for Kurlikowski to make any bold statements on marijuana. Keep talking about treatment instead of incarceration. Keep talking. I'm looking for him to say those words, harm reduction, however. Yeah. Those are words that we need to hear coming out of the mouth of the drug czar and the president. Harm reduction. Harm reduction. You know, it was a good thing back 11 years ago. Rudy Giuliani wanted to shut down methadone maintenance in New York City. The best thing that ever happened to methadone maintenance was Rudy Giuliani wanted to shut it down. Because all of a sudden, all the people, even those who were lukewarm about it, had to stand up and say, wait a second, it's got a role to play. And the media, every methadone story in the media was always a bad story about something bad happened. All of a sudden, massive public education. And Barry McCaffrey, one of the few good things he did as drug czar, he came to New York City, visited a methadone clinic. You know what Bill Kurlikowski has to do? He's got to go visit a needle exchange program. That's what he's got to do. Now, there's a bigger question, of course, about where are we headed? Where are we headed? Because, you know, in a way, our struggle is not just the struggle of the moment. It is the multi-generational struggle. It is, in part, about drugs, about the reality of all drugs, about the fact of the matter that not only have we never been a drug-free society, not only will we never be a drug-free society, but that, in fact, the diversity and variety of drugs is just going to grow and grow and grow. Turn on the television, which I don't do that often, but turn it on, and when you do, look at those commercials, one after another after another. Do you feel sad? Do you feel depressed? Anxious? Worried? Do you feel anything at all because we have a drug for you? Oh, yes, we do. And you know, for better or worse, that is the future. We will have drugs being produced legally and illegally by multinational pharmaceutical companies and underground laboratories, producing things to make us go from sick to fine and from fine to better. That is the way of the future. And the question for us really is, how do we accept that reality? We know after decades of failure that we cannot build moats between ourselves and between our children and those drugs, between ourselves and those drugs. It doesn't work. It cannot happen. Who has the best access to drugs in America today? It's young people. Who had the best access 20 years ago? Young people. Who will have the best access? Young people. We're not going to protect our kids by more and more people going to prison by fantasizing about more and more votes. Yeah. which we love, which we cannot imagine living without, and also a drug that sometimes we wish we could do without. It is a drug that has created enormous mayhem and chaos and death and suffering, and also enormous pleasure and wonderment and all of these good things. What is that drug? The automobile. Now, the fact of the matter is, we have no alternative but to accept the reality that automobiles are here to stay, and that we have no choice but to learn how to live with them so that they cause the least possible harm and the greatest possible good. The same harm reduction definition and challenge we apply to other things. Now, I'll tell you something. If you look at the history of the automobile, at least in our society and some number of others in the last few decades, what do you see? You see more and more cars on the road, driving more and more miles, yet fewer people dying, less pollution going into the air, less people being wounded and hurt. We ain't there yet, but what it does mean is that a powerful substance, a diversity of substances, can become ever more available in our society, yet we can reduce the harms associated with them. We can learn how to live with them so that they cause the least possible harm and the greatest possible good. We have no choice but to embrace that reality, because the world of our children and grandchildren requires it. Now, what that means is being smart and sensible. The role of the criminal law in dealing with those automobile drugs is relatively minimal, limited to those who drink under the influence of our drug in order when they're utilizing that other drug, the automobile. But apart from that, criminal laws don't play that big a role. It's the same thing with our drugs, the drugs that we deal with in our movements in our society. That ultimately, the role of the criminal law has to be at the edges for the people who are under the influence and put other people directly at risk. But we can't accept the reality. We can accept the independence and the freedom of people to utilize these things, to consume these things as they wish, and to hold them responsible for the ways in which they use them. We can look for ways to make them safer. We can provide honest education, not dare-type programs, but cultural-wide, society-wide education. Because ultimately, the best protection we have in moving forward into a world of ever more drugs is not a punitive system of criminal prohibition. It is the empowerment and the education of us, the consumer, of us, the human being, of us, the one who lives day in, day out, with our own pains, our own grievances, our own urges, our own everything. Using these drugs for better and for worse, but learning to live with them so that they cause the least possible harm. Some people wonder, why is Drug Policy Alliance putting so much effort into the area right now of reducing overdose fatalities? Why, I think in your booklets, do you see a purple ribbon? I'd appreciate everybody who has one of these purple ribbons, or if you don't have one, get one at the register. Wear that purple ribbon. Because what it means is that you want to do something to reduce the terrible loss of life to accidental drug overdoses. Accidental drug overdoses have tripled or quadrupled in the last decade or two. Accidental drug overdoses is taking tens of thousands of lives each year. It is killing more people than auto accidents in about 15 or 16 states. It is the #2 leading cause of accidental death in America today. The drug czars are beginning to get it, but people aren't really talking about it. Why are people dying? And increasingly not from the street heroin, but from the pharmaceutical drugs. Why is this happening? Well, in part because of a drug war prohibitionist system that requires people to get their drugs from the street. In part because we don't believe in honest education. In part because we believe that if only we crack down hard enough on people diverting these drugs, that somehow we were protected. Well, we cannot. Not with the internet, not with everything else. We cannot in that way. So this is the struggle to reduce the number of people dying from overdose fatalities is like the struggle to reduce the number of people unjustly incarcerated in American societies. This is not just about reducing the oppression of the government, although that is our objective first and foremost. It is also about reducing the harm and the suffering that attend the use of drugs in our society. It is both those struggles that we have to pursue simultaneously. So go out to that people tonight. Make your presence felt. It's about the victims of the drug war, the victims of the police, the victims of prohibition laws, the victims of people who have suffered with HIV and hepatitis C and who are dying of overdoses. That's part of it.